The Golden Key to Reality and Abundance, a deep dive with Brandon Beachum. Get ready for an immersive journey with the dynamic Brandon Beachum, diving into understanding the true nature of our human existence and how this knowledge can catalyze tangible success and impact. We also tackle the challenge of transforming fear into trust, stepping into alignment with the emerging world. Brandon shares the 8 keys to abundance from his book, The Golden Key, promising greater joy, success, and abundance in all areas. And for the entrepreneurs out there, get inspired by Brandon's extraordinary journey from a modest beginning to exceeding 10 million in annual revenue. Stay tuned for a conversation that could redefine your perspective on reality, fear, entrepreneurship, and abundance. Welcome to the Wellness Driven Life Show, where you're about to go on a wellness driven ride. I'm excited to share a little bit more about the guests that we have here today. Brandon Beachum, a thought leader and entrepreneur, co-founder Resort Share in 2011. He hosts the Positive Head podcast and Optimistic talk show, focusing on sharing spiritual insights. His podcast has over 20 million downloads and ranks number 2 in Apple's spirituality category. In 2021, he published his first book, The Golden Key, Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance. I am so pleased to help welcome Brandon. You know, this is a very exciting time to have you here. The show is concentrating more on spirituality. So this is going to be a fun topic because, you know, none the wiser you are here to be able to share so much insight and wisdom on that.
Well, I think that's a good decision. As I say in my book that you reference, The Golden Key, it's all spiritual business at the end of the day. So, you know, it makes sense to always at least look and consider in that direction in any sort of, whatever path you're walking, consider the spiritual implications, I would say.
Yes, well, absolutely. So I'm going to ask you more about that, but let's start by sharing a little bit more about you so the audience can get to know you more.
Sure. Yeah. I'll give you my Cliff Notes life story. I grew up on the East Coast in Virginia and raised in a very as normal a household as one, you know, could hope to be, if there is such a thing. And as one could hope to experience. So, you know, pretty typical upbringing, and didn't have a lot of trauma or, you know, hardship per se, middle class. You know, my father became very religious when I was around 11 or 12. He became, you know, deeply spiritual, and in sort of a religious, dogmatic way, a very conservative Christian sort of mindset. And so I started going to church. You know, I had went with my grandmother most weekends, but Sunday mornings, but now it was Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, you know, and I ended up going to a Christian college in Tennessee, and a very conservative Christian college. And, you know, around that time, of course, you know, your brain fully forms by 25. Now I'm getting up to 20, 21, you know, age range, and things aren't adding up as much as they once, you know, you're taught these ideas and they're kind of burned into your brain. Then you start thinking for yourself, and it's like, this, you know, this doesn't quite add up. In some ways. And as I remember seeing a comedian say years ago, you know, God put you here, gives you this book that's confusing, and if you get it wrong, he's going to torture you for eternity. But he loves you, you know? And so as I started to go down that path, I ran across a woman who claimed to have some intuitive or psychic abilities. And that was like a first for me. And I was like, and then she demonstrated some things that sort of supported her beliefs or her claims. And so I was intrigued, very intrigued. And so I started reading books and, exploring. This is like now the mid 90s. And I started exploring some of these concepts outside of, what would have been the devil, in my church. And yeah, I can only think, because it is my dharmic path to do the work that I'm doing. And, I've almost 10 years of the Positive Head podcast and, 2,000 plus episodes. It's definitely my dharmic path to share a lot of these, my thoughts on the ultimate nature of reality, and teach best what I most need to learn, as I like to say. And so I can only think, because that was my path, that it was like, as I started to read things like Conversations with God, which was coming out at the time, and I had the pleasure of interviewing Neil Donald Walsh on Positive Head podcast recently, which was really cool for me. These ideas and concepts that were all one with the source consciousness that creates and animates all things. And everywhere I go, I'm there waiting for myself. It's all me reflecting me back to me in some way, shape, or form, just like landed in such a powerful way that I was like, oh my gosh, of course, this is how it's structured. This is brilliant. This is so simple. It's so complex, yet so profoundly simple. And, so I would talk to anyone who would listen about this stuff. And, it was sort of, at the time, it was like, what are you smoking? Or people were like, that's interesting, and go about their regular life, back to the normal programming. And now, over this journey of 25 years or so, I'm just seeing, as it's become, people are waking up more and more and more. And now I'm surrounded by, every 21-year-old in my community. It's like, yeah, of course I know I'm one with source. Like, that's old news, whereas back then it was like, what are you talking about? So it has been cool to take the journey and see, the progression and the awakening that's transpiring on our planet. And then, of course, like you said, you mentioned I've been a serial entrepreneur my whole life. So then applying some of those ideas of, okay, I'm one with the source consciousness. I am abundance. Abundance is my birthright, the quintessence of my being, and as I say in the book, and it's all of our birthright. We are it. We built this place. We just have amnesia to the fact that we built this place by divine design. And so it's all a part of you. And so as in my own experiment of, tapping into that, I've had some ups and downs and all arounds, as you mentioned, from my friend's couch to an Inc. fastest growing private company, to getting offered to be bought out for tens of millions of dollars, to losing it all within 12 hours of that because of something in the business world, a partnership that happened and affected us adversely, to betrayal, to redemption. It's a movie script, and it's my personal movie, and we all have our personal movies. And so yeah, and just sharing that along the way, and here we are, sharing it again.
Wow. Well, Brandon, you certainly are one to be at the forefront of leading people into this, what we like to call awakening, right? Where people really start to understand that spiritual aspect of ourselves, and that it really is key. And so I think it's such an incredible day and age where, yes, you're correct. It is starting to be more common language of, spirit or God or whatever you want to call it, but this spiritual aspect of ourselves. And I really like that you mentioned that it is all by divine design, when we come into this world and this play that we have with it. And Neil Donald Walsh was also on the Wellness Driven Life show. And
Cool.
So the Conversations with God is really this incredible perspective, bringing it to the forefront and having people, think a little bit differently. And I think that's the awesome part about it is when you start to think differently and understand things differently and question things differently. So let's go back a little bit with that said, because you mentioned that you were, heavily into Christianity, you went to school even and all the things. And then there were moments where you started to question. What were some of those things that you started to question and you didn't feel like really added up?
Yeah, this idea that, we get this life, however many years, 80, 90 years if we're lucky, and that, to me, God, source, higher self, the universe, consciousness, whatever you want to refer to it as, it is it all. It makes sense. What would be outside of the one, right? And so then now we're creating, there's this great meme where it shows Jesus knocking on a door, and someone says, "Who's there?" "Jesus, let me in." "Well, what if I don't let you? Why should I let you in? To save you from what I'll do if you don't let me in." It's like this idea that, it's so obvious that it's man-made ideas. God is a jealous God is actually a thing that said, it's like, hold on, if you're all that is, what is there to be jealous of? There's nothing external of it all, right? So it just it didn't add up in that way at all. And then these ideas of, one thing I would always use whenever I have a healthy debate, sometimes not so healthy in the past, but I try and be as healthy as possible and not angry or I don't want to be that hell and brimstone on the other side of it either. Like, you're wrong and I'm right, and you have to learn to walk that line when you're as fiery as I am. But one of the things that I would share as, whenever I'd be talking to someone who believed in this idea of there's a God is judging you, and if you get it wrong in this short period of time, then he's going to torture you for eternity. It's like, hold on, that math is really, really bad. 80 equals eternity. Like, okay, how about just torture me for 1 trillion years and let's give me another chance to get it right, because the book was real confusing, right? And so one of the things I will use as an example when I'm talking to a Christian is like, we're God's children, right? And yes, okay, they'll usually agree with that. And you would also agree that the love that we experience is a fraction of the love that God is, right? And typically they're like, yeah, I mean, God is love times infinity, and we're this small, whatever love we experience doesn't even compare. Okay, I agree with that. You agree with that? Okay. Now, you being a fraction, being able to retain a fraction of the love that God does. If you have a child, do you have a child? Yeah. Okay. You do? Oh, great. I got a question. If you were God, is there anything that your child could do that you love with your limited amount of love that you would then decide, if you were the judge, to torture them for eternity? I've never had anyone tell me yes. They're like, oh, so what you're saying is, if I become infinitely more loving, then I'm into torturing my children. And it's like, doesn't really add up for me, And what does add up is the idea that what I put out is coming back, because I'm always doing it to self. So energy must balance itself in a fair and equitable way. Everywhere I go, I'm there waiting for myself. So whatever I'm doing to you, I'm literally doing to an extension of self. And therefore I must feel the energetic repercussions of it in a natural way. And so, yeah, that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but happy to address any other parts of that maybe you would like me to.
It's a great answer, and I think it gives a really good example when we start to think of, well, exactly that. And a parent role is a really incredible example of that too. I always felt like when you become a parent, you learn what to die for really means.
Yeah.
And when we start to put that into a different perspective, as far as biblical terms are what sort of God we have, it certainly doesn't add up all the time. So that said, when you started venturing out and you saw some different things, and this is what's exciting too, right? When we get curious and we get excited to learn more, we want to dive deeper into, learning as much as we possibly can. And you're just this sponge soaking everything up. And you certainly have been that when you have done thousands of interviews and leading into this mass amount of ideas and knowledge and thought. And so that said, Brandon, what were some of the things that through your experience were really aha or very moving for you?
That's a great question. I've had a lot of, let's say, spiritual breadcrumbs, or synchronicity stories that have been just really. I have a friend. I hadn't seen him in a while, and he reminded me the other night when I saw him for the first time in over a year or so. Where I was sharing stories, and he's like, "Mr. Synchronicity." That's what he used to always do when he'd see me, because I'd always have some kind of like wild story of magic or synchronicity or serendipity, and so yeah, I've had a lot of experiences. I mean, I remember, since we're talking about early on in my journey, one of the first things I was reading was about out of body experiences and astral projection and things like this. And I'm telling my brother about this book that I'm reading, very early on. And he's like still sort of he's 2 years younger than me and still kind of like thinking the way we were taught to believe, about, spirituality.
Yeah.
And
So
he's
what's
like,
brother getting into now, right?
yeah, right. He's like, dude, what do what are you're taking mushrooms or something? Like, what's happened here? Like, and I'm like, no, I mean, you can leave your body according to this book through meditation or becoming lucid in your dream state, awaken the dream. And he's like, well, that lucid dreaming thing, actually, I know what you're talking about, because I used to, I used to do that when I was a kid. And I was like, well, if it ever happens again, say I want to leave my body, and buckle up, because you're going to leave your body and, explore the astral realm. The next morning he comes down and looks like he's seen a ghost. He goes from making fun of me the night before to, oh my God, because we talked about it, I became lucid in my dream state. And I remembered what you said. I said, I want to leave my body. I popped out. I'm sitting there looking at myself laying in the bed. Wave my hand in front of my face. It's pure energy. And he wasn't, and it's happened to him a bunch since, and he's not seeking it. Like, he's not the first guy in line at the roller coaster. I always say, and it was a great firsthand, confirmation for me. And then, one other little story. I mean, I have so many, but I'm reading a book at that time, and this guy claimed he could communicate with animals around him, and he had this profound experience with, several animals. It's been a long time, 20 plus years since I read that. But at the time I was in this heightened state, I'm reading this book. I'm this young guy, like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting, who and what we are. And I think, in that open wonder, inviting state. And so I walk in my room, and it was a really big room. I shared a 6-bedroom house with 6 guys, and I had the master at the time. So I'm in this, it's probably 20 feet away from me at least. There's a moth flying in the top corner of the room. And so I said, well, if this guy can do it, I bet maybe I can do it. I hold my hands out and say to the moth, telepathically, land in my hands. And it instantly flew across the room and landed in the palms of my hands. And now I've tried that a bunch of times since, and it's never worked again. But in that moment, it was spirit showing me, like, yes, this is real. It is all connected. You're on the right path. So, things like that, little things like that. And they just continued. I have some pretty wild, stories of spirit communication, and, that have led to really tangible things in my life. And, talked to my grandfather on the other side recently for the first time, and then it led to something really profound in my life. And so it's, it's kind of like, once you open the door and start looking, it looks back, and that's really exciting.
I like to call it evidence. You start seeing the evidence of, spirit all around you, and energy. We're energetic beings. One of my most favorite things about this day and age that we live in is all the science that's, here backing this aspect of ourselves, and
Right.
all the frequencies and the emotions and everything that really ties together and creates us more than what we physically see, hear, feel, right? And I was curious. I was going to ask, before you mentioned your grandfather, if it ever feels mundane to you, getting these.
Never. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think that's why, I've had a lot of people on the show and things who, they channel supposedly, or they're having experiences with extraterrestrials, or, a lot multidimensional experiences. And I haven't had a lot of that stuff, but what I have had is a lot of very grounded, like evidence-based, like layered synchronicities that are sort of on a level that are beyond, I think, the average. And I think I always say the reason I think it happens so much is because I have that childlike wonder around it. I mean, I get
Mm.
as excited now as I did the first time. It's just like, it's so magical and exciting. And the little boy in me is like, oh my gosh, and I think that's part of, one of the only Bible verses I will quote these days. And I do think there's some wisdom in there, is lest you become like a child, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. And, that's, I think, a very important thing, that childlike wonder and openness and imagination and possibility and believing in miracles and all of that opens the door to these realms, I believe.
Yeah, I would say that there's a decent amount of wisdom in biblical aspects. The faith of a
Sure.
mustard seed moves
Yep.
mountains, right? That's
100%.
that's energy. I think that it might have been Neil Donald Walsh actually that pointed out that Jesus, said thank you before he
Mm,
performed miracles. That gratefulness and aspect of it too. So like, there's a lot of things that you can pull out of it that are
100%.
really specific to this, but of course it's not. It doesn't say just flat out that this is who
Well,
we are and this is what
well,
we are and the connected aspect of it.
yeah, Jesus wasn't a Christian. He wasn't saying worship me. He was washing people's feet. He
Right.
wasn't, so, what did Jesus, let's really analyze it. What he was saying is, hey, everyone, hey, I'm God, and he also said, you'll do greater things than I. When he was supposedly, now I know they didn't have tape recorders back then, but they quote Jesus and it was all written down many, many years later. So, but one of the things that, that when he was on trial in front of, I believe it was Pontius Pilate, they were like, what do you have to say for yourself? We've captured you and we're going to kill you potentially because you're running around saying you're God. And he said, his response was, isn't it written in your what's the Old Testament, like the old scripture, ye are gods, plural. That was like his like, hold on, ye are y'all, everyone, you're gods. He was like, that was his defense. And now here, what did we do? What is man so good at? We put someone on a pedestal. We then, then you get, people wanting power around it and make it that Jesus is some special conduit to your divinity. And all he was saying is, we're all it. I'm it. It's same thing I'm saying right now. They just don't put you on a cross for it these days. And, and it was hijacked, I believe, and then taken and turned into, yeah, good thing. And, I think it was hijacked. And like I said, he wasn't a Christian. He wasn't saying worship me. He was saying, wake up, you're God. We're God. I'm God. Follow these words and you can attain with the faith of a mustard seed. You can move a mountain. You create with your beliefs,
Another one of my favorites is when, what is it? 3 or more come together. You can do big things and
gathered in my name. Yeah. You literally create a field of energy that can do a lot.
And that is, I mean, science backed intensely now. I love the work that Joe Dispenza is doing with that too, globally. And,
100%.
we've got the Global Consciousness Project that really builds upon that, and Math Heart Institute. But so Brandon, you talk about synchronicities too. I'm curious, staying on that just for a moment. Have you found, because you keep diving into this, interviewing other people, researching, learning more about who we are, the true self, right? Do you find that the synchronicities at various points in your life were more prominent when you felt like you were going in the right direction?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think there's definitely a correlation between, am I in an expanded state? It's like the moth. I was in a state of like wonderment, having with what I just read, and excitement about what was coming alive in me. And I think that's that childlike wonder we talked about, right? So, but if you are, it's vibrational pools, right? Everything is vibration, right? The particles that make me up, they're not solid at all. They're 99.99999% space when we zoom in and look at them. And there's vibrations of energy that are popping in and out of existence. We don't know where they go to when they leave, and we don't know where they, but they're intelligent when they show up here. And it's frequency, it's vibration. So if I'm vibrating at a state, it's why I love podcasting and doing this, because right now together, me and you in real time, and then the listeners who even tune in later are literally stepping into, behind you is water, behind me is the universe that leads, its wall goes water around it. Ultimately, if you can see the rest of the painting, we're stepping into a pool of vibrational frequency that literally is elevating ourselves, that now we're in the zone where we can actually experience these sorts of things. If I am sitting here stressed out, angry, mad, Power versus Force, the book, I don't know if you're familiar, does a great job of showing the different levels of emotion and rating them. And when you get past a certain point, anger is above, apathy, or, like just depression. It's like, it's moving up the scale. And as you turn the corner into a more positive, mindset ultimately, and that becomes your base operating system. And then you get into these more elevated states. I've had a lot of experiences at transformational festivals. So I go to, me and my partner, we run a co-living and event space in Los Angeles called the Mystic Manor. And we do like transformational mini festivals for a day at our property. And there's a lot of my friends and just community have put on and produce these festivals that are kind of like Burning Man-esque, Lightning in a Bottle and Lucidity Festival. And there's a big eclipse gathering in Texas in April that we're going to. And I'll go there in April, and it's going to be 50,000 people who are all on a spiritual path to some degree, having, working on being their greatest and greatest self. We're going to watch a full solar eclipse that will last for 4 minutes, and it's the most sci-fi thing you can ever see. We did it in Oregon in 2017 or 17, I think. And here you got 50,000 people together thinking and vibrating in this pool. And I've been going to a lot of those sorts of events over the last 10 plus years, and so many magical things have happened at transformational festivals. And I think it's for the very reason you just stated. When 2 or 3 or more are gathered, you create a field. You feel, and it becomes amplified with all of us together, and it, boom, opens a portal of possibility, and magic ensues like clockwork.
Yeah. We had Roland McCratty, excuse me, I'm not saying his name properly. He is the head of the research department at the Math Heart Institute, and he also works with that Global Consciousness Project 2.0. Mm-hmm. And he mentions very specifically that there are people who gather together and are very intentional about bringing their brain heart coherence together, and very intentional on healing specific areas in the world that need it the greatest. Yeah. And so I think it's just brilliant that we have this understanding. And I love that we, again, live in this day and age, Brandon, the things that you're doing with the podcast, with the show that you had, the things that the Wellness Driven Life show is doing, with sharing all of these things globally. And not ever a time in history have we had such, quick access globally to share information. Yeah,
it's amazing. I reference in my book, The Golden Key, a incident in I think it was early 90s, where a group of meditators came to Washington, D.C. and said they would, claimed that they would shift the crime rate by, I forget, like 28 or 30%, something like that. It would be a reduction by the time they finished their over a couple months. They would meditate daily, and the chief of police went on TV or something and said it would take snowstorm in July in order to reduce crime by that much. But these guys knew it would do it because they'd seen it before. They'd done this, shifting, the energy of a geographic location with intention before. And sure enough, by the end of it, they achieved exactly what they said they would. And the crime rate was greatly reduced in DC that summer.
I think that that's amazing and very well aware of it. I don't know if you know, I have a law enforcement background, so I came
Oh,
from that
cool.
background. And
I know
one
that.
of the biggest aha concepts for me was actually the broken window theory, which is where um, as far as our external aspects, our world, right? The broken window theory is if you fix a broken window in a neighborhood, crime reduces. And so it's just about having this pride in your environment and all of
Mm,
those things, but that energetically shifts everything as well. And so I think that those sort of things are really incredible.
mm.
We're going to move into our first commercial. And when we get back, I can't wait to hear a little bit more of the stories that you have to share with us. Stay
Thank
tuned.
you.
Are you ready to take control of your ride to wellness? Rev up with Driven Living. Visit www.drivenliving.com and buckle up for a journey. Get exclusive access to our Wellness Driven Life Show guest portal, where you can dive deep into the minds of our esteemed guests. Sign up for our newsletter and get insider scoops on these distinguished personalities. It's like having a backstage pass to their life-changing wisdom. But that's not all. You'll also receive a free hug. You heard me right, a free hug. An enlightening ebook from the Driven Living team. Discover the science-backed benefits of hugging yourself. It's a fill-up for your wellness tank. Because at Driven Living, we believe in fueling your journey to wellness, both physically and psychologically. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.drivenliving.com today. Welcome back here with Brandon Beachum, everyone. And so we're having a really great conversation about spirituality. And Brandon, your life's journey has been nothing short of extraordinary, I would say. Very fast-paced, moving for, being someone, I would say, that's quite young to be learning so much about the self and who we are, and also that unity that we all share, the oneness that we all share, which is an interesting concept for many to feel, when you first have the idea of, well, what is this oneness? And, being able to accept that even, well, I don't want to be a part of this person or that person. That said, based on your journey, were there ever moments that you felt like it was difficult to understand or accept some of those concepts?
Mm. I think I always say it's one thing to understand this stuff conceptually, and it's a whole nother thing to, walk the talk. Mike Tyson said it best. Everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And so life tends to, you understand, these concepts, and that regardless of what transpires, you're okay. It's all happening for you, not to you. And, I always say smooth seas never made for a skilled sailor. And we all came to be skilled sailors. Oh, you got all that? Okay, let's see. And that's really what happens. We get to sharpen our axe, and it comes through those challenges and those tribulations. And of course, you have moments of we're human. We have the moments of frustration and doubt, or, negativity. It's funny because, my podcast is Positive Head, and I have friends who've known me my whole life. They're like, oh, I wish they could hear the counter, your alter ego negative head, and that's, they'd say it jokingly, but there's truth in it. They've seen times when I'm just being super agitated and angry and, all those things. So I think we get to work on our nervous systems, and that's a big part of this journey. And okay, how can every moment is another chance to turn it all around and do it differently, and things circle back for lessons that you haven't learned. And for me, that's what inspires me to, okay, here I am being challenged again. Oh, this really pushes my buttons. Okay, I want to get it right so I don't have to repeat this lesson. And so, So yeah, I mean, it's not always easy, but I also believe we're not ever given more than we can handle, and that you get everything. Everything that you get is perfectly designed for you to become the next greatest and grandest version of yourself. And once you at least have that as your core belief of your operating system, it takes the sting out to some degree. It's like,
Mm,
oh, if this is, I'm in a valley. Well, a peak is, the sweet's never quite as sweet without the sour. And I know that. And now why is this happening for me becomes the question to,
yeah.
okay, there's going to be a gem here. There's going to be, a diamond behind this lump of coal. Start focusing on that as quickly as I can. And of course, you have the moments where you're just like, I need to feel the feels of the negative emotion, or, it's like clouds passing, and
Mm,
best thing to do when that happens is not to get caught up in then judging yourself around it. Like, oh, I fell off the wagon and I'm an idiot and I know better. And, that really, is one of the things I think people get tripped up on the most.
ah, judgment. Yes, absolutely.
Self-judgment.
Expectations, right? Well,
Yep.
Brandon, I really like how you said it takes the sting out a little bit when you have this awareness, this understanding
Right.
of why things might be happening. And really, I've always said it's we're all on our own soul's journey. And for me, it's a better perspective, because if somebody does something that pisses me off, right, and I'm like, I would never, but it's because everybody's on their own soul's journey, and
Yeah.
they have to experience that. It's just where they're going. And I think as a parent, it was a beautiful way for me to understand that concept, because as I want to take care of my girls. I don't want anything bad to happen to them. You have that sheltering piece as a
Yep.
parent that you want to provide for your children, because you don't want them to experience the horrific things in life that you did. And
Yep.
yet they're on their own journey, and
Yeah.
they might need to experience some of those hardships, because otherwise they're not going to be able to grow spiritually, right? And so
Hmm.
one of the biggest things that happened to me in my life that was very traumatic, I was not having it. I did not like it. I'm like, I don't understand why. And there's no good reason. Right? And you have those moments in life. And I thought it was so fascinating. This is one of those signs that comes. And I was driving on a highway, and we were relocating, and we had the U-Haul van packed up, and we're driving out of state. And I drive on this highway every single day. And I've never seen this sign, Brandon. And it said, "Don't look back. You're not going that way."
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
not an advertisement sign. It just is. It's just this
Yeah.
saying, "Don't look back. You're not going that way." And
I love
it's just
that.
that subtle, not even a subtle, but it's just that sign,
It
saying it's okay. You're going the way you need to go, even though it hurts.
Yeah, right. And I've heard it said, your spirit, your soul, your higher self, that's how it navigates as well. So
Mhm.
when you are stepping into that perspective, you are aligning with your higher self. It's looking forward in the direction that we're headed, which makes all the sense in the world. Obviously, you want to learn from the past, but dwelling there makes no sense. It's
Mm.
literally it holds us back, and so yeah, there's a great Chogyam Trungpa quote where he says, the bad news is you're falling through space, uh, nothing to hang on to, no parachute. The good news is there's no ground. And that says it all right there. That's you. That's me. That's all of us. And you can't lose, what you are. It's just,
Mm.
bringing that sense of childlike wonder and openness and
Yeah.
with everything really allows you to get the gifts in the especially the things that are hard. Like your child, for example, if you protect them from everything, like it your immune system needs to be exposed to things. They did a study with trees where they put them in the perfect environment, perfect light, perfect water, perfect everything, and they would grow to a certain point, and then they would kind of like fall over and die, and they were like puzzled until they finally realized what was causing the problem. there wasn't the stress of wind, which made their roots strong. And we need the stress of the wind in order for our roots to be strong as well.
Oh, that's a really cool perspective. I haven't heard that one. I love that.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. Let's talk a little bit about your book and the
Mhm.
8 keys that you've developed.
Mm-hmm.
Share with
Yeah.
us what this passion, you have so much brilliance, that so much
Oh, thank you.
that you've learned throughout these years. So I know that a lot of that is within this book, these
Mhm.
pages. So share with us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I obviously have a lot to say. I'm very verbose. If you don't believe me, based off of this conversation, you can go listen to my 2,300 podcasts. And and so the idea of the book, The Golden Key, which came through in synchronistic fashion, and sort of the prompt to do it was, okay, I want to kind of be as concise as I possibly can for once, and record, 100 pages, little over 3 hours to listen to, distill down what I would see as my 8 keys to, modern alchemy to unlock infinite abundance. And so that's what the book is about. And, I have the 8 keys, as I see them and based off of my experience and perspective. And I just break those down as concisely as possible and distilled them down. And and then I decided, I want to do things a little different. I'd like to actually gift the book and give people the opportunity to gift the book. And then if they want to pay something for it after reading it, because they got something out of it, they can do that. And so I just made a little gamified way to do that. And I am happy to share with, folks how they can do that if now's appropriate, where they can go to get it for free as a gift.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that so they know where to access it. And then it
Mhm.
will also be in the description below. But share with us this gamification aspect
Mm.
that you've
Yeah.
incorporated with it, and I was sharing this with you prior to our interview, but that it's not common for
Mhm.
authors to just gift a book. And so you've restructured this in a lovely way, I feel.
Well, I felt like it was, walking the talk to say, okay, what if instead of selling the book, I allow people, you guys can go to goldenkey.gift, and use the code LOVE at checkout and download the audio and or ebook. And then it gives you the opportunity to create your own key code to share with others. And then if people come back afterwards and play sort of a abundance manifestation game where they can opt to donate for the book, then it's set up where it will share that with the people who, referred someone. So it's just like, how do we just share it all, And so, you can read about it in the book, more details, but that's high level how it works. And it's been a really fun thing to play with.
I love that you do that. I think it's very, very cool. And again, it's going to be in the description below. So, Brandon, you have interviewed so many people. And, I mentioned before, is it sometimes difficult to take in some of these concepts? And you even said that I've had all of these synchronicities, and not going into maybe, speaking with extraterrestrial or anything like that, but I've interviewed a lot of people that have done it. So,
Mm-hmm.
what has been your experience with some of the most craziest things that you've heard? And has it been easy or difficult for you to just be open-minded about those ideas, or have you always been
Mm-hmm.
open-minded about it?
Yeah, I mean, I've remained pretty open minded, and because I've had a lot of my own experiences, I think it left me, completely open. I also don't just believe everything that I hear. I'm like, oh, I'm open, maybe so. Oh, you seem legitimate. I have no reason not to believe you. I've seen so much magic myself. And is there people out there who maybe are fabricating things and, pretending to channel or what? Sure, I'm sure there is, I try and approach everything with a very open mind, and, just and see what I experience. And so that of course speaks the loudest. So, I know we only have a few minutes left here today, but I'm happy to share a quick story if you want, that happened to me recently. That was like a spirit communication, for my grandfather.
Yes,
Uh,
I would
sure.
love that.
Sure. So I had a dream that my grandfather, who, he died in 1985, and I remember I was a little boy in church, had the intuition that he will die on this day, and I need to remember it. And that came back around in dramatic fashion in recent years too. But that's really a different story. Why I needed to remember it became important. I think I might have bumped up against the reincarnation of my grandfather. It's a different story than this. But so anyway, I dreamed the other night that, or a few months ago, that he was coming through in the dream state, and he said, "Hey, I remember I was excited in the dream because it's, oh, my grandfather's here. I've got him on the line, and my grandmother too, his wife." My mom's parents. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've broken through. I'm communicating with them. And he said, "Brandon, I want you to meet my friend Peter Finch." And he was a friend of mine from World War II. Now, my grandfather was on the Utah in Pearl Harbor when it got bombed. It was the first ship to get hit, and he jumped and swam and lived. And luckily for me. And so I woke up and I wrote down Peter Finch, World War II. And I'm thinking maybe it's his friend on the ship that was standing next to him who didn't live, or I don't know, or maybe it's just a dream, right? And so I go and Google Peter Finch the next day, and he's a real guy. He's a famous actor, the first actor to win an Oscar after he passed. And my son is an actor. He's been in like 45 productions in the last couple of years. And I had an intuitive tell us that he was going to be this huge actor, when he was a kid. And, Charlie Chaplin was a spirit guide, and she'd never had a spirit guide come through that was famous. And, here he is years later, and he's doing really well with his acting. And so I see Peter Finch, famous actor. This must be tied to Bradley, my son. Then I'm reading down on his Wikipedia, also in a famous battle in World War II as a gunner. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. Not only is it real, is it tying to my life in some way? This guy, the other thing, the Battle of Darwin, at this famous battle, And so instantly, I hadn't even seen my son that day, but I'm going to play tennis with a friend, and I'm walking out the door, and my son texts me, "Hey, Dad, can you help me do this audition tape? I have, it's for a World War II film, and I only have an hour to submit it. It's like a last minute request." Now, because of the dream, I canceled my tennis plans and did it. And as I'm reading opposite, I have to read lines with him. His character, I'm like, "Hey, Private, how about I just stand behind you and say moo?" Now, moo was what we called my grandmother, who was with my grandfather in the dream.
Wow.
He submits the tape. He only has an hour or so to do it. The next day, they get back to him. They want him. 2 days later, he's on set as a gunner in full regalia on this film set for a new potential show that's coming out, and so it's like it led to this real world, ripple in my life, so that's just a fun example of the veil thinning, if you will.
It's a cool example. And Brandon, I feel that more and more people are going to be experiencing these things. And it's such an exciting aspect, because this is really what evolves us as humanity, is experiencing these things, connecting more with that, the lifting the veil, like you mentioned. And so that's a really cool story. Our son too is in Hollywood, so maybe we'll have to do
Cool.
that. So all the aspiring actors, I love it. And that is just a beautiful thing. So thank you so much for sharing that. Brandon, it has been amazing to have you on the Wellness Driven Life Show today. Is there anything else you want to share with the audience?
Yeah. The last thing that I would like to share is just, how important it is to remember that you are as worthy as any other being ever has been, could be, or will be. You are it. It is literally you. So we get so caught up in comparison in this world of Instagram, and, anything showing up on your Instagram feed, as an example, is just a close reflection of you. And so if you admire it or want it, or, would like more of it in your life, guess what? Out of all the things vying for your precious attention, it's showing up, because that which is like unto itself is drawn. So it's not something to compare against. It's something to say, I'm inviting more of that into my life. And here it is. What a great sign. So you are one with the source consciousness that creates and animates all things. There is no one more worthy. And the sooner you start realizing that and stepping into that truth, the quicker the things that are your birthright can show up, the next level, the next greatest and grandest version of yourself. And that it is the most important thing, though, to understand. And self-love, it's the number one thing we're all here to get. And the reality is it's all you. It's all a part of you. And I believe in you.
I love that. Thank you so much, Brandon. It's been such an honor and a joy to have you here on the Wellness Driven Life Show. Be sure to check out the Golden Keys book, and it's going to be in the description below. Brandon, it's been amazing. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thanks so much for having me.
A pleasure. And thank you to our audience. Without you, the show wouldn't be possible. So thank you so much for tuning in. Goodbye for now, and we will see you next time.